Hey guys, I'm so happy to be back. I hope you're doing well. I've noticed Bustier Corset style tops have made a comeback this season, and I'm sure it was brought on by fashionistas looking to shed their pandemic loungewear and slip into something more daring. So today I'm kicking things off with this DIY Bustier top. So let's get right into it. This time around, I'm using a fitted women's blouse because as you can see here, the bodice is already taking on the shape of a bustier. The other plus is that it has just enough stretch to conform to the body and be comfortable. To give you more of an idea of what to look for, here's what it looks like on. It's form-fitting and the hem hits right around my hips. It's okay if there's a little gaping around the bust or the tummy area since we'll be using the lower half of the shirt for our bodice. As for the bra, I recommend choosing one that provides full coverage like this one and avoid ones like this with a low cut deep plunge. Another thing is to make sure the bra has molded cups and more importantly that the cups fit you well. Now quickly try on your bra and measure from the center front down to the length you'd like your bustier to be. Once you have your measurement down, we're now going to deconstruct the bra in preparation for the next step. But just before you do that, make sure to mark which side is the center front for each cup. I'll be using the strap tabs as reference for mine. Next, prepare your shirt by folding the back in half, then aligning and pinning the side seams together to keep it all in place. Once you've pinned and laid your shirt out nice and flat, take your bustier length and add a ½ inch allowance. We only need about a ½ inch since the hem is already finished. Now from the shirt hem, measure and mark the length of your bustier. From there, take your ruler and draw a line across the top and cut. This will be the bodice for your bustier. Before we get to the cups, let's first figure out the placement. From the top, measure and mark a ½ inch for the allowance. And from the fold, measure and mark a ¼ inch. This is to add a little separation between the cups. Now place one of the cups right at the corner of the ¼ and ½ inch mark. Make sure the other side of the cup is also a ½ inch from the top. Holding the cup firmly in place, trace along the bottom from one corner to the other. Once you've outlined the cup, measure and mark a ½ inch from the curve for allowance. Afterwards, cut along the allowance line to reveal the opening for the cups. To prevent distortion, we're going to stabilize the fabric by sewing a row of stitching a ¼ inch from the edge. But first, we need to reinforce the bridge between the cups as this area will be under a lot of strain. To do this, grab a piece of scrap fabric and place it under the bridge, roughly 2 to 3 inches down, then trace around it and cut. Pin the lining in place, then go ahead and stay stitch the edge. Here's what it looks like once done. By the way, I did serge the bottom of the lining before stay stitching. To figure out how much fabric you'll need for drafting, measure the length and width of one of the cups, then add 4 inches. For instance, my cup measured 8¼ by 5½, so I cut a piece of fabric 12¼ by 9½. Now grab some pins, then place your fabric over one of the cups. Try to make sure it's somewhat even on all sides before sticking a few pins down the center to hold the fabric in place. Starting from the top, Smooth and pin along the edge to begin shaping the cup. Continue smoothing and pinning around the sides until you get to the bottom where you'll have extra fabric left over. This extra fabric will be used to form our bust dart. Once you reach the bottom, remove the pins from the center, then collect the extra fabric and fold it over onto the cup. From there, trace along the fold line to form one of the dart legs. Do the same for the other side, or run your nail along the fold lines to form a crease. Next, pin the dart in place, then starting from one corner, outline the shape of the cup. As you see here, I use the side of my marking tool and not the tip to trace along the top edge. After you've completely traced the shape of the cup, remove all the pins. Now I'm just going to quickly trace my other dart leg following the crease. You may notice my dart has a slight curve. This is what's going to help us avoid that unwanted pointy dart tip. Before cutting, add a 1/2 inch allowance. Locate and mark the center front of the cup. Depending on the style cup you use, it may not seem like much of a difference, but I recommend it anyway to be on the safe side. Afterwards, fold the dart in half and pin the dart legs together. From there, measure and mark a 1/4 inch from the edge, then cut to remove the excess. Now our pattern is ready to go. I went ahead and prepped my shirt by opening up a part of the side seams and all the darts, so I'll have more fabric to work with. I then pinned the edges together to keep it all in place. We'll need 4 cups, so I cut 2 from the back and the other 2 from the front. You could use the sleeves, but I plan on using them later on, so I'm trying to save on fabric. Whatever you choose, just make sure the stitch runs horizontal to your cups. After cutting, make sure to mark the center front on all 4 pieces before removing the pattern. First, we're going to sew the darts on all 4 cups. With right sides together, pin and sew a 1/4 inch along the dart legs. When sewing, make a slight curve at the corner to taper off the dart point. Afterwards, clip the corner close to the point, then press the darts open. What you should have is a more natural bust dart. Now, to insert the cups, first lay out your bodice with the wrong side facing you. I jumped ahead and already pinned one set in, but to do that, take 2 cups with the center fronts together and wrong sides facing. Then find the opening that matches the center front of the cups with the center front of the bodice. Afterwards, find the center of the opening. Mine just so happened to fall on a back dart that's on my shirt. From there, we're gonna align the bust darts with that center point. I hope you're able to follow along so far. Starting with the lining, align the right side of the bust dart with the wrong side of the bodice and pin. Now take the other cup and do the same on the other side, pinning the bust dart to the center with right sides together. Once you've done that, sandwich the opening between the cups and pin them together. You may find that the cups are slightly larger than the opening. In that case, just try to ease in as much of the excess fabric as you can. After pinning, finish by sewing the cups a 1/2 inch from the edge. With the cups now attached, clip the seam allowance close to the stitch line. I did have about a 1/2 inch that I couldn't ease into the cups, so I quickly removed it before moving on to the next step. Next, grab your bra cups and sandwich them between the bustier cups and lining. Close the top by pinning close to the bra cups to keep them in place. Trim the seam allowance down if it's more than a 1/2 inch. Now on the right side of the bustier, take your ribbon and fold one end over a 1/2 inch onto the center back. From there, pin the ribbon roughly 1/8 of an inch from the top edge. Do this along the top until you get to the other side of the center back. You'll finish the other end of the ribbon the same way, but I recommend waiting until you start sewing and are nearing the end of the center back to do so, just in case you may need more or less ribbon. Usually this is the part where I say go ahead and finish, but it was at this point I realized I skipped a whole step. I forgot my straps. You could use 1-inch ribbon, but I made my own by cutting and sewing 4 strips of fabric 19 by 2.5. I then turned them over and closed one end by tucking the raw edge in and sewing across the top. I had already sewn my ribbon on before I realized my mistake, so what you're gonna do is take your straps and first figure out the placements. I placed my front straps towards the center of the cups and used them as a guide for the back ones. Afterwards, try on the bustier and make any necessary adjustments to the straps as well as the bodice. I found mine to be a little big, so I took in the sides using safety pins, then tried it on a couple times. Once I was happy with the fit, I marked along the safety pins, then made my alterations. With your straps in place, proceed with the previous step, adding the grosgrain ribbon across the top. Since I already sewed mine on, I opened up the ears for my straps, then tucked them under the ribbon and sewed them in place. This is what it should look like when you're done. Next, notch the curve above the cups by cutting small V-shapes from the seam allowance. This is just to remove some of the bulk and help the seam lay flat. It might be a little difficult with the cups in the way, but just do what you can and be careful not to cut into the stitch line. As for the bridge between the cups, just make a slit in the allowance. To finish, turn the grosgrain ribbon onto the wrong side of your bustier, then pin and sew following the edge. For the final step, I added boning to the side seams to help the bustier maintain its shape and keep it from riding up when worn. I did this by first measuring and cutting a strip the length of my side seam plus an extra inch. I then removed the boning from its casing and clipped an inch from one end. Afterwards, I pinned and edge stitched the casing over the side seam, then insert the boning back in and fold under the raw edge before sewing around to finish. You can of course add more strips if you want, like along the front and back. Speaking of the back, I sewed a heavy duty hook and eye at the top, and I'm happy with it for now, but I think I'm gonna replace the buttons with a zipper in the near future. Now in case you're interested in seeing what I did with the rest of the shirt, here's a quick rundown. So I first removed the collar, then cleaned up the front by cutting diagonally from the neckline to the armholes. I pretty much turned it into a cropped Bolero style jacket. That brings us to the end of this video. Let me know if you found this tutorial helpful. I would love to see you add your own spin to it, and if you decide to give it a go, please share and tag me on the gram. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.